Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Dan Sweeney. I am the Deputy Opinions Editor of the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. The editorial board consists of several members, but primarily myself and Opinions Editor Steve Bosquet, who is having a little bit of connectivity issues, but will probably be along shortly. Also with us are newsroom reporters Shira Moulton and Scott Travis. It's important that you all know that when it comes to endorsement decisions, our newsroom reporters have no say in who we endorse. They may be covering this race and will do so on the news side of the paper, but as far as the opinions side is concerned, they don't have any input into who we pick to endorse in the race. But they are more than welcome to ask questions, given that they do know a great deal about the board. So I suppose we will start off. Steve's back, but again on mute. Why don't we start off? I'll ask each of you to just very briefly highlight for me why you would be the best person in this race for the job. And we'll go in alphabetical order, which means Mr. Adderly, we will start with you.
Thank you, Dan, and good afternoon, everybody. Mourice, it's the first time that you and I have met in this setting, so welcome. Looking forward to a collaborative race. And Allen, always good to see you. And Steve, whenever you get off mute there, he's gone now. And Scott, it's good to see you too. But my name is Raymond Adderly, running for Broward County School Board, seat 8, countywide. And yeah, I just mentioned I left psychology class. Yes, because I am a student, and I am a recent graduate of Fort Lauderdale High School and a proud alum of Fort Lauderdale High School, as well as the former student advisor to the school board. And why do I feel I'm the best qualified for this job? It is because I understand the necessities of our students, our teachers, and our parents being a product of Broward County schools and being there most recently, living in a school society where the grim reality of being shot in your schools is so near all the time. I'm the only candidate in this race that has actually been to school with that reality. I'm also the only candidate in this race that had to live through a pandemic and go to school during it. And that uniquely positions me and qualifies me to speak on these issues like I did as the student advisor. But more importantly, it gives me a keen understanding of the issues that are happening in the district, and to parlay that concern on the dais. And I say this often. Yeah, there is a lack of diversity on the board. But what's most important, what's most unique about my candidacy is not only do I bring diversity of skin color, but I also bring diversity of thought. And I think you can't go wrong with that. So again, Raymond Adderly, running for Broward County School Board, seat 8.
Thank you. Mr. Mo, why don't you start us off here?
Well, hi, my name is Mourice Hylton. I'm glad you referred to me as Mr. Mo because that's what I'm known as throughout the county. The reason I believe I'm most qualified is because I'm, in terms of being a politician, I'm not qualified. I think the position of a school board candidate should not be a political position. It's usually, in recent years, it's been used as like a catapult for people to go to the next level of politics, and it shouldn't be that. So I want to, just say that's not my reason for joining in. I actually have a vested interest in the education of our students. I am a product of Broward County school systems, and to follow up with what Raymond said, I actually went to school after several school shootings, so I know what it's like to go to school and be fearful of that being an issue. And matter of fact, when I went to school, there were a couple of incidences where we were under lockdown because there was a threat. And Chris Hickson, who we all know was in the Parkland shooting, was actually my campus monitor, and he was there several times reacting to the situation. So I definitely understand what it's like to go through, he's recently graduated, he's gone through circumstances, and I can definitely relate. As well as I work with the education system now. I am a vendor, I do chess education, and I provide services to different schools through Broward County, whether it be private, public, in the Equity Entertainment Diversity Office, through juvenile detention programs, AMI kids probationary programs, things like that. So that's my main reason. Is like I'm a parent, I'm a former student, I work with education, and I think the position needs somebody that can relate to all elements of what it takes to make up a school system.
Thank you. And Mr. Zeman?
Oh, thanks a lot, Dan. There's really three reasons why I think that I'm a great candidate, and I'll leave it up to the voters to decide who is the best. The first is that education matters, and we have to have spokespeople on the board who understand that education is a lot more than some people claim it to be. And I've lived an entire life dedicated to training and education. I ran the largest training and education system in the world. I stayed in college forever, so now I have a PhD and I get to be Dr. Zeman now and then, Dan. But I know that education matters, and we really have to think hard about saving our democracy. And one way to do that is to continue to educate the people who live here. The second is that experience matters. I've done a few things. I've been around for a little while. I grew up here and went to college at Florida State to get a PhD when I was 24, went off for the Navy. 8 years later, was selected to be a senior executive, ran their training and education system, and then was sent off to Iraq for a year to be the chief economist for Reconstruction. Since then, I've run a company that's been reasonably successful, doing work that I find very meaningful. We're a data analytics company helping organizations fix their human capital issues. But experience really does matter. And with all due respect, Ray is uniquely qualified. But if I were to write down some conditions, one of them would be enough life experiences that you're bringing. And 41 years ago, I was the first school board representative. I was the president of the student council at Fort Lauderdale High, Ray, and I was asked to go sit at school board meetings for a year, which I did. But I've also sat on the DoD school board for 8 years, and I sat as chair of the Fort Lauderdale Education Advisory Board. But I do believe that in this particular role for this board at this time, experience really matters. And the last thing is that energy matters. I have always brought a significant amount of energy and activism to things that I've joined. I have the ability to work late and work hard, dedicate myself to these students and to this system. And some of the things that I'd like to do in a county-wide seat are actually statewide things that we really need to think about, like the overall funding for education and some of the policies and laws that have been passed, which I think are going to be shown to have pretty significant secondary and tertiary effects on teachers, on administrators, and on school staff. And we need a spokesman that can talk about those things and make sure that everybody understands what those impacts are. So Allen Zeman for school board, I really believe that education matters, experience matters, and energy matters.
Okay, well, I see that my boss has his hand raised, so I will defer to him.
Well, not only that, but he's turned his mute off. So way to go, Steve.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. A little bit of technical difficulty, but thanks for your patience. I've listened, I've heard most of it. I haven't had a chance to meet you gentlemen yet, Mr. Hylton, Mr. Zeman, but Mr. Adderly and I have spent some time out in the field at political events.
No.
Steve, it looks like you're frozen.
Okay, well, he'll probably be back again. I have a couple of questions I wanted to follow up with. Mr. Zeman, you said that you want to affect funding levels for the schools in your opening statement. I wonder
Yes.
how a school board member can affect funding levels that almost entirely come from Tallahassee. Can you describe how exactly you would go about that?
Sure. I think being a school board member at the second largest county in Florida gives you a platform, but it also gives you an ability with my background. I wrote budgets in the Pentagon for 13 years. I spent a lot of time balancing my own $9 billion budget. And I've got some experience on how government funding and government programs are put together. I believe in something I find fascinating, which is without adjusting the tax code with the additional revenue that's coming into the state of Florida, if 50% of that additional revenue within the current tax code is spent on education, we will do 40% raises for everybody that's an educator in Florida over the next 5 years. And what that'll do, Dan, is it'll put us at the median level finally of compensation in Florida. More importantly, it'll help us build a better state. So I think an activist can do this. I think the chairman of the Fort Lauderdale Education Advisory Board could do this, but it's hard. I think somebody who has a county-wide seat and represents 2 million of the 23 million people in Florida has a seat at the table. And I'd love to sit down with my Navy buddy, Ron DeSantis, and say, Ron, this is a bipartisan issue. You could be the government, you could be the education governor, but to do that, you have to hit where it matters the most. And right now, as much as I'm kind of a hard-charging businessman that sees inefficiencies in the way we're spending money, there's also a limit to how much you can do within the $8,100 that we're going to get next year for students in Florida. And it needs to be funded at a different level. And again, if we can do that without changing taxes, with the additional revenue that's projected to come in Florida, I think this is something that both Republicans and Democrats can get around.
And by the way, I believe Donna Korn just joined us.
I did. Thank you so much.
Hi, Ms. Korn. Thanks for joining. Listen, why don't I just circle back around to you straight away and ask you the question I asked your three opponents that are on the line, which is, if you could just describe to me why you think that you are the best candidate to have this job, or in your case, to keep this job.
Sure, I would love to. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So I will speak to my experience, having been now a school board member in the countywide seat. I've been on the school board for the last 11 years, but I bring the experience of being the mother of two children who have just recently graduated from Western High School in Broward County, as well as a high school sophomore going to be a junior at Western High School. So I come with the experience of being a mother, of having 28 years of experience in the private sector as a managing director for Cushman and Wakefield, as well as ultimately having classroom experience here in Broward County. So I was in the classroom teaching English to sophomores, juniors, and seniors at Western High School, which was also my alma mater, having myself also graduated. So the experience that I bring is as a businesswoman in the community, very active with children's issues. Over all of the years that I have been involved with the Children's Services Board, the Children's Services Council, the Early Learning Coalition, serve as the vice chair of the Value Adjustment Board for Broward County. And so I will tell you that all of those experiences collectively give me the depth of resources and knowledge to be able to make poignant decisions when it comes to budget issues, as well as when it comes to issues that directly impact classrooms and our students, in addition to having the endorsements of the Broward Teachers Union, the Broward Principals and Associates, as well as the Hispanic Vote and Equality Florida.
Yeah, if you can hear me, I got a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll cycle back to Mr. Zeman. Allen, you're one of three challengers challenging an incumbent member of the Broward School Board. Now's the time to tell us why the voters should turn an incumbent out of office in favor of yourself.
Wow. Thank you, Steve, for inviting that. I think there's two kind of principal reasons. And by the way, I'm one of four candidates for this race, and one of us is going to get more votes than the other. I understand that there's an incumbent, but you know, I think that the voters are going to meet all of us, and they're going to make a decision between the four of us. I believe that I'm a very good candidate, and I think that there's an opportunity to start fresh with the Broward County School Board, and I can tell you a list of reasons why that is. One of the things that bothers me as a voter, as a taxpayer, as someone that owns houses here in Fort Lauderdale, is the execution of the SMART bond and the avoidance of responsibility for decisions, even though votes have been taken on issues. The school board, by Florida law, has massive responsibilities. And at the end of the day, they are the elected officials who represent the 2 million people that live here. And to avoid responsibility for things that you voted on and for things that you watched happen, that you were responsible for overseeing and monitoring, I think is just irresponsible. So the SMART bond is in many regards, did not execute very well. It's certainly going to take a lot longer. And the consequences of that, Steve, is that there's a breakdown in the trust between the people who elected the school board and the school board itself. And how does that have consequences for our students? It has consequences that a referendum that many, many people would support is at risk because they don't trust the Broward County School Board to execute it any better than they executed the SMART bond. The second and maybe more pressing reason is that 15 months ago, a grand jury report was released. All of us on this call are very aware of that. There were 7 people that filed and entered into litigation to squash that report. That's been through the circuit court. It's been through the district court of appeals. A total of 2 paragraphs out of about over 120-page report has been taken out. And now it's time to release the report. And I don't think any school board member is qualified to run for school board if, in fact, they're paying a lawyer or affecting that litigation in a way to suppress the report. It's fine to say, let the voters decide. But Steve, the voters need to see the grand jury report. It is, according to the District Court of Appeals, going to say very critical things of the school board, and it's going to ask the governor to remove some members. And we cannot have a free and fair democracy if reports like this put together by an independent grand jury are squashed through litigation. So I'm curious, Donna, are you one of the people paying to have this report squashed?
So, Mr. Zeman, I am more than happy to answer the questions of the panel, but I was not looking to answer questions of others that are being interviewed, unless that was the way this was set up.
I'll interject here. No, that's not the way it was set up, but I think Mr. Zeman is asking a very fair and pertinent question. So I'll ask the question on his behalf, Donna, if that's okay.
Sure.
And what is your response?
So in terms of the grand jury report itself, it's not something that is public, and therefore I can't actually address anything that may be in the grand jury report. What I can say is that the grand jury itself, in terms of the report that's come out, there's an entire process, and part of the legal process is looking at any appeals that would be necessary based on a review of the report. So anyone that may have been interviewed and then may have been included in the report does have an opportunity to review it. And if they do want to have legal counsel and there's an appeal that is something they think is appropriate, then the appeals process would then take place.
Okay. Well, Ms. Korn, this is Scott. Without telling us what's in the report, are you allowed to say whether you are one of the people appealing the findings of the report, and whether you've hired a lawyer to appeal what's in there?
I don't know if that's actually something I'm allowed to answer or not. I would be happy to follow up and then get back to the panel.
Okay, yeah, please do if you could.
Let's stay on this topic for another minute or so, my colleagues, if it's okay. Ms. Korn, let's just back up a step. Why would you not echo the sentiments of Mr. Zeman and feel that the grand jury report in its entirety, except for those 2 paragraphs that have been disputed and ruled irrelevant, may not be the right word, but by a judge, why would you not wholeheartedly favor the release of the report at this time?
I absolutely wholeheartedly support the release of the grand jury report as soon as the legal process is complete. So whether or not there is 1 or 2 or 3 levels of appeals, just as the first appeal is available, any subsequent appeals based on what that response was, if they're available to anyone who is involved in the grand jury, should have that opportunity. So I wholeheartedly am looking forward to its release. But if there's anyone who is pursuing an appeal, they have the right to do so. And it's not a matter of whether or not it should be released. It's a matter of affording the legal process, just as it began, to be completed.
I hear what you're saying. Everybody on this call, I'm sure your fellow candidates believe and support fundamental due process rights. However, put yourself in the position of the voters of Broward County for a moment. There are about 1.2 million voters eligible to vote in this election. This is a nonpartisan countywide election. It's going to be decided by a lot of people, this election. And the question is, before I go to vote on August 23rd, boy, I'd really like to know if my school board member, Donna Korn, is mentioned in this grand jury report. And if so, what does the grand jury report say about her? Is she one of the people that the grand jury thinks should be removed from office? What would you say to a voter who had those concerns?
I certainly appreciate that. And from a timing perspective, I don't know when the grand jury report is going to be released. I don't know that there's anything that keeps the grand jury report from being released, even if appeals are in process. So, I mean, I don't know I don't believe that the appeal process is one in which it keeps the grand jury report from being released. But I can tell you this, just as the response to the most recent appeals did produce that there were certain things that needed to be refined in the grand jury report. If the appeals process continues and additional findings result, then it would not have been appropriate for it to have been fully released, because then additional items may not have been appropriate to be in it. So when you don't exhaust the legal process and do right, then what happens is you now truly are not following the legal process. And in terms of, when the votes are happening, the election being August 23rd is one in which, if the legal process exhausts itself before August 23rd, then it will come out prior to that. But if it doesn't, to thwart the legal process because of an election is not appropriate.
Okay, I'd like very briefly to bring in Raymond Adderly into this discussion. Raymond, do you have anything relevant on point to say to what you've just heard from Ms. Korn?
I actually don't. I do agree with my friend Allen. I do think the report should be released. I do think voters deserve an opportunity to know which school board members might be recommended for removal or have been found to do things that are unethical, rather. But I also, as a law clerk and as one that works for a defense attorney, I definitely understand the due process of those people that might be indicted. And so I am very looking forward to the grand jury coming out so that we can maybe finally shake up the culture of Broward County schools and, for God's sake, once in a while have some transparency as far as what the business of our board members are currently doing or have done previously to the grand jury. But more importantly, I think that, we need to be very certain here with what it is that we're looking for in this grand jury. I really do want to focus on what the grand jury was put out to find, which were where this district is lacking as far as school safety, which I think is a really big issue here that is in play with this grand jury. And I really think this type of political grandstanding for, additional votes is not the way we need to go. I think that if board members were found to be guilty of any crimes or of any mishandlings of budget, certainly should come to light. But I really think that we need to focus back in on the school safety aspect. I think students deserve to be safe in their schools, and that's what the grand jury was put to find.
Okay, I want to come back to Donna Korn just for one moment, if I can, Donna.
Sure.
Regardless, do you, as a general principle here, do you have faith? Do you believe in the credibility of this grand jury process? Or do you believe that this is a fishing expedition, a witch hunt? Can the public have faith that the grand jury's findings, whether you agree with them or not, that they're credible?
My response to that is that I believe that it is politically motivated, and I will let the voters determine whether or not they believe that it's credible.
Mr. Zeman, how do you feel about that?
I'm straining with incredulity, to be honest. This has been appealed twice. It's been litigated once, appealed to the District Court of Appeals. The only way the Florida Supreme Court, which is the next level that would hear this, is if with the same evidence, because even at the District Court of Appeal, you're not allowed to bring new evidence, but you have to bring the same evidence to the Florida Supreme Court and basically say that either the judge was wrong or the process was wrong for the findings that are in. So this has been litigated once. It's been appealed once. The lawyers are holding this back. It's a process. What I'm worried about is, and to Ray's point, this is all about safety and security, right? This is the biggest issue in parents and teachers and employees and residents' mind. We've seen Uvalde. We could see Uvalde here again in Broward County, but we can't let the voters decide unless the voters have the report. And if a candidate for school board is actively going to a third level of appeal, and therefore this report doesn't come out till after the election, you know what the consequence of that is, Steve? If the incumbent is reelected and then the report comes out the next day, Governor DeSantis gets to appoint the new one after the election. And I just feel like that's not the way that you run a free and fair election in a democracy.
All right. I want to open the floor to my colleague, Scott Travis, and to Dan Sweeney here at this point.
I have just one quick question to Mr. Hylton, Mr. Moe. You mentioned in your opener that you're a vendor for the school board.
Yes, sir.
How is you being on the school board and being a Broward Schools vendor not a conflict of interest?
Well, I'm not an official vendor, so let me clear that up. I don't have a contract with the school board, but if a school, because the school already has a chess vendor, they use chess for life. So I have a relationship where if a school reaches out to me for after school programming or any level of programming, that I can step in, but I don't compete with the current contract. So, I mean, when I misspoke when I said that. So I'm not an actual vendor, but I do have a relationship with schools where I do have programs, classes, curriculum that can be implemented within the after school or even in the detention center programs where the school does allow me to go because there's no competition for that one.
Okay, well, let's say that such a contract opens.
Okay.
Do you think your company can bid on that while you're a school board member?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Matter of fact, I'd probably make it a point that I wouldn't even. I would probably leave my position with the just so there's no conflict of interest if they do want to compete for that. But I still think they probably should not compete. I would actually prefer to go elsewhere and do business than to have any issues or conflicts within the county, because obviously, you know, there's already some distrust with the board members or at the board level. So I wouldn't want to put myself in a position where I would create further distrust with that particular board.
Okay, Scott, did you have any questions?
Yeah, Ms. Korn, there's a story that WLRN ran quoting Lori Oliduff, and it says that she supports removing school board members, if that's what's in the grand jury report. Quote, I support holding people accountable, Oliduff told WLRN. If the information comes out that certain school board members should be removed to hold them accountable, then I think that's important. Can you respond to that comment?
So Ms. Oliduff joined the board from a very painful place, and I can appreciate her position in feeling as if she would support that position. She's a colleague of mine. I work with her for the betterment of children every day. If those are her personal feelings, I will look forward to continuing to work with her to do good things for children, students, and staff every day. And we all have the right to hold those opinions. So it's unfortunate, I guess would be my words, but it doesn't change anything in terms of the impact of how we serve together.
Okay. And this question will be for all candidates, regardless of, obviously, Broward school issues and complaints about the way that it's run are not new and unique to the grand jury. So we don't know what that says yet, so we can't comment specifically. But I would like to know, to each candidate, do you believe that the school district has a culture of corruption? And if so, what do we need to do to change that?
So I would be happy to
go ahead, Donna or Ms. Korn.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I can tell you that regarding the referendum, we did just actually do an independent audit, and it came back that we have successfully, over the 3 years that the referendum has been in place, those dollars have been spent exactly where we had told the voters they were going to be spent. So that accountability is there. In terms of the bond, there's not been any indication that I'm aware of there being corruption. The reality is that even myself, we go through the process.
I'm sorry, Ms. Korn, it sounds like you're breaking up a little bit. Do you mind? The last thing we heard clearly was, as far as the bond, I'm not aware of any corruption. And then after that, it was hard to hear. So if you could just repeat whatever you said after that.
So,
okay. We're not hearing it.
You're not here. Okay. I haven't changed location, so I don't know.
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So in terms of the bond, our responsibility is in the implementation and the oversight. And so we as a board took on many steps from the very beginning to do just that, to implement and to do oversight, from hiring Jacobs to bringing in Atkins, initially to be bringing in third-party CB Richard Ellis Heery, seeing that changes needed to be placed internally from some of the hiring that was done with our chief facilities officer. That change needed to be made. We changed from Heery because they were not producing the results that were necessary, to another very reputable national company with AECOM. We also, as a board, put in the oversight committee specifically so that would be independent of us and give us reports on a quarterly basis, which we do here in a public setting and respond to on a regular basis, as well as being able to bring in Tax Watch. And all of these elements are ones to ensure that we are consistently being transparent with the information, as well as to ensure that there is oversight beyond just the board, so that corruption is not something that would occur or has occurred. So in terms of there being a culture of corruption, I would tell you, no. In fact, I don't hear people talking about corruption. When we talk about the bond, we talk about it taking long. We talk about it costing more money. And those two things are factual. It has been very frustrating for me to go through this process and to push back and continuously look for us to have avenues in which we've been able to resolve this. And in some cases, we certainly have been able to move the needle, but not nearly as quickly and in a timely manner. And unfortunately, costs have gone up all across this country and certainly in South Florida. And those are realities that we're dealing with. But at the same time, I will say this. One of the things that we committed as a board, and when we talk about the corruption, the reality is we made a commitment that we had, not only were we going to take care of the projects that needed to be done across the district, we have committed to continuing to complete those projects. So even if they cost more money, 30 years ago when we had the last bond, that board walked away and said, we're not going to be able to finish these projects because we don't have the money. And this board has said, we will continue to put the money towards these projects because we have committed to this community that these projects have to be done. And so we are living up to that promise. And we are completing all of those projects. And some of them have actually been expanded because some additional work has been needed over time.
Okay. All right. And then if I could hear from the challengers, and we'll go in alphabetical order, which I'm sure Mr. Zeman knows that he will not be the first one to speak. So Mr. Adderly.
Alphabetical by first name if you want, Scott.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. My last name would be Mr. Adderly.
Thank you. So, I mean, is there a culture of corruption in Broward County schools? To say that people are not talking about the potential of there being corruption just shows the grave disconnect between the community and current school board members, because I, for one person, certainly do hear that word thrown around a lot. But more importantly, is there a culture of corruption? I'll let the voter decide whether or not there's corruption, but I certainly know there is mismanagement on every single level. Having an oversight board and having Tax Watch is good, so we can see where we are in terms of the bond. But the fact of the matter is that we are still not making significant gains in that. Certainly, we're able to give our students technology access through the pandemic via computers and Wi-Fi. But as far as the facilities of our schools, we are still underperforming Miami-Dade and Palm Beach County as far as facilities are concerned. But more importantly, it is troubling to me that we, as a school board, has still not figured out ways in which we can fast track these bond projects along. And that's because we continue to use the same contractors that we know have completely botched the project in general. More importantly, how do we change that? We change that with having people that are not tied up to the construction world or to the private sector. You add someone new, someone fresh, someone that knows the realities of, having roofs collapse on students and live that experience, someone that understands what it's like to have mold in their classroom and have teachers that get sick because of it, and students as well. And so that is the way that we change the problem within the board. You elect me because I know those issues, but more importantly, I'm not tied in any way to the construction world or to past school board members that were disgraced in their exit on the school board as far as endorsements are concerned. And so that is what's most important. And that's the way that we completely change the culture of the district. And then lastly, I just want to say, I know that we are committed to finishing the bond project, and we should. And I just want to challenge the equity of the bond project, because the poster children for the bond project, construction on those schools have still not even begun. And I know Mr. Zeman worked really hard as the chair of the Fort Lauderdale Education Advisory Board on Stranahan, and I worked really hard with him too as the student advisor. And we still haven't seen any resolve over there. And so I think it takes, like Mr. Zeman said earlier, someone that's energetic. And I can argue that I think I'm the most energetic candidate, being the youngest. And so that's what I think we need.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moe.
Thank you. I echo everything that young man just said, because he's been in the schools most recently. I've been in the schools, like I said, I've had relationships with different schools. So I've walked certain campuses and I've seen the conditions. So I'm not going to reiterate everything he just said, but is there a hint of corruption in our schools, in our school system? Absolutely. I mean, if you're using the words grand jury and school board member, there's your evidence right there. If you're using the word like superintendent recently arrested, there's your evidence right there. Those are words that should not be used when it comes to school board official or suits anybody involved in education. We talk about school safety, and I'm sending my kids to a school where I can't even trust the people who are in charge of making decisions about the schools. I go to the school campuses, and the facilities are gross. We just came out of COVID and we're talking about washing our hands and keeping everything clean and neat. But you go on a campus now, you don't even want to walk in the bathroom just for the smell alone. Like, is there a hint of corruption? Absolutely. So I echo everything Raymond just said. I know Mr. Zeman's probably going to say the same exact thing. This is why all three of us are running, because if the tool is not working, you change the tool. And right now there's a lot of people that's on that dais that have been saying these things over and over and over again. And we walk these campuses and nothing is getting done. So we need to change the tool, because right now it doesn't smell right. I like to speak the layman's language. There's people in our communities that don't understand what's going on, because we like to talk around the issues instead of making it super transparent. So that being said, yes, there's corruption.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Zeman.
Hylton.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, I meant Mr. Zeman next.
There was an intended pause between the thank you and the Mr. Zeman.
Right, yeah, trying to speed
maybe
things up.
Wasn't a pregnant pause enough, Scott. You got to work on the pregnancy part a little bit. One, Scott, it is a great question, but I'm going to break it down two ways. Is there the literal culture of corruption? I don't know for sure, but I know that there's a strong perception of corruption, the literal sense of corruption. And it includes things like the superintendent, the general counsel, the CIO, all being arrested. It includes 11 years ago when the grand jury got together and said, the independent grand jury, by the way, got together and said, boy, if we had the right to do so, we'd abolish the whole Broward County School Board. And this grand jury needs to come out as well. But it's also true, Donna's got an issue as well that I still think has to be dealt with, which is she stayed at a vendor's house twice. She posted it on Facebook. It was written up in the Sun Sentinel. These things do not help, regardless of the facts around that case. To stay at a vendor's house and then to come to a school board meeting and speak in favor of that vendor gives more credibility to the people who want to perceive that there is real corruption behind. The second form of corruption, though, is the corruption of thought. And to me, Scott, that's even more important, because I don't think the Broward County School Board continues to do things that are in the best interest of students, staff, and faculty and parents. I think they talk a lot about it, but I don't think they do it. To me, there's a say-do gap. We say that this is our North Star. We really want to have a great education system. We want to, do great things for the community, and we can talk about it all day. But when you look at school board meetings, when you look at decisions that are made, when you look at some software that's not renewed, when you look at the fact that Dade County has figured out how to pay the average teacher $12,000 more per year than Broward County has, I think there's a corruption in intent. We're not working hard enough on the budget. We're not finding efficiencies. And we've got to continue to remind people that education matters. We can grow a better state if, in fact, we take some of these additional tax dollars rolling into Florida and spend roughly half of them on public education. So yes, is the answer to your question. There is a perception of corruption, both in the literal sense, but I think worse off, there's this idea of corruption of thought, that we say one thing and we don't do that. We're not working hard, as Mr. Moe said, to clean the bathrooms, to have the right number of facilities, to put people in the right place, to support, to care, to engage our staff and teachers, and to compensate them in a way so they, like Ray's mother, feel honored and valued for what they do. So yes, both literally and in terms of the corruption of thought, I don't think Broward County is on the right path.
Right. And since you brought up the issue, we need to ask Ms. Korn about the issue that you brought up involving the vendor. I am aware that Ms. Korn, that you said that you have you paid back the vendor within the time, therefore not creating an ethics issue. Just to let you know, I do check probably every month or so with the ethics commission to see if there's, because certainly if that's been dismissed, if you've been cleared or whatever, I want to, I want to, out of fairness, be sure that I'm reporting that. So far, they haven't, the last few times I've checked on that, they haven't given me an update. Do you have anything as far as what you could say as far as the status of that, or do you want to respond to what Mr. Zeman said?
I'd be happy. So what I can share is that before we went on that trip, I reached out to legal counsel at the school district to ensure that my taking that trip was something that was not a concern from an ethics perspective. I did receive that back in writing, that it was not, that there were steps that I would need to take, which I took. In fact, have the checks that I wrote were in excess of what I would have otherwise been required to do. I shared those. The reality is that at the time that I took the trip, I had just recently been through a horrific divorce. And so it was an opportunity in which myself and my children very much needed to just get away and have an opportunity to have a little bit of space and downtime. To this day, it is one of my kids' favorite trips because it really, truly was just time to relax and get away. In the meantime, after that trip, there was a vote in which Johnston, who was a competitor to the Herff Jones Polari, did come to the board for the first time since I had been a board member, and I voted to bring in Johnston as a competitor to Polari. And the fact that there have been votes since just speaks to the fact that the contracts coming up and there are differences and changes to those contracts. And in the most recent vote, unfortunately, the information that staff had provided to me in terms of what they were supporting and why they were supporting it or actually withdrawing it was not actually aligned with what they shared publicly. And so it was very concerning because I actually did not think it was ethical to walk you were they presented.
Okay. It sounds like you were breaking up there. So I think the last thing we heard was you said something to the effect of the information staff shared sound like maybe it wasn't consistent with what maybe they shared publicly or something, but we didn't fully hear that. So maybe repeat that. And then whatever you said after that.
Yeah. So, share.
Still not
better.
very.
I don't know why it's changing. Right, let me see if I can pick a different location. Is this better?
A tiny bit, I guess.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay. So I can move to another area, and I don't normally have any problems.
That's better.
This is better. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So what staff shared with me was not what they shared publicly, and the information did not align. In fact, the steps that they were taking were, for me, not ethical by not moving forward. They had reasons in which they said that they were removing the item were not the reasons in which they had shared with me. And the reasons they had shared with me did not meet that ethical standard.
So what was the reason they had told you? Was because you'd gotten parent complaints? I remember, if that's what I recall you saying at the time.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that they shared publicly. But what they shared behind was because they were looking to manipulate the response from the vendors.
What was that word? Manipulate?
Yes, that was the word.
They told you they wanted to manipulate the...
No, that's not their word. That's mine.
Okay.
They were actually going to be changing the RFP specifically to gear it to certain companies, types of companies being able to respond. To me, that's manipulating.
Did that in fact happen?
Did they change the RFP? Yes, they did.
But I mean, the way you said it sounds very negative, but there's another way to look at it, that you're only getting one vendor, and it's supposed to be open to multiple ones. So if the process is designed in such a way to only yield one, and you're trying to make it more fair, that would be the other way to see it. But that sounds like that's not the way you saw it, as an opportunity to allow greater competition.
No, not at all. Actually, the opposite. The way that they changed it was actually taking certain vendors out of the response. And the reality is Jostens did actually respond, and their response didn't meet even the minimum threshold to be brought forward to the board. So it wasn't a matter of responsiveness. There actually were competitors such as Jostens who did respond. But the response, and by the way, that wasn't my threshold. That was the threshold at the review level before it comes to the board. So Jostens actually responded. They didn't meet the minimum response. That's the only reason they didn't come forward. So it wasn't a matter of not having an RFP that actually invited multiple vendors to respond, but rather the changes to the RFP then in eliminating the opportunity for some to respond. And I'm very happy for multiple responses. That's why I supported it the first time. We went from single vendor to multiple vendors. I supported that and would have supported it again, except that's not what was brought forward.
Okay. Okay. And then do you know what the status of the ethics complaint issue is? I have not been officially noticed of anything, but I believe there will be something in July, but I don't know that officially. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. We're getting the clock starting to be a factor here. I do have one question for Mr. Adderly. Raymond, we've spoken about this in person, and you were asked about it on your questionnaire. You know, this is a leadership position. Leadership requires taking tough positions, sometimes unpopular positions, but positions hopefully grounded in principle and well thought out. So I'm asking you for a yes or no question, a yes or no answer on whether you support or oppose the referendum on the August 23rd ballot, the property tax.
You said yes or no?
Yes, sir. Because that's what the question is on the ballot. This is a yes or no question.
Yes.
Okay, and why is that?
I certainly support the intent of the referendum, and I certainly do understand the necessity of it. And so I do want to see this pass because I understand the grim consequences of if it does not. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I am very weary, and so are many teachers and community members, with the way in which this will be allocated. And I've spoken to many teachers that feel they will not get a fair shot at this referendum. I've also spoken to many seniors in this district that feel that this time in this place to have a millage increase on their properties is just not appropriate, with the fact that, rent is so expensive, property values are going up, and people are having a really tough time. And so, yes, the community does want to get behind this, and so do I, and I will. But just saying, I do have reservations that, this referendum, and hopefully, Ms. Korn and the board, they say that the last referendum was sent correctly through the audit that they had on it. And so I'm hoping that when I get on the school board that I can do the exact same thing. But more importantly, I'd just like to finish in adding this part here. This referendum is extremely crucial to maintain the current security and mental health professionals that we have in this district. And that is the sole reason that I can support it alone, because I do not want to see those staff members go and have to find other jobs. But last thing, Steve, I promise, this is the biggest reason, and the reason I'm running for school board, our lack of proactivity. If we knew this money was going to run out at some point, why did we not start making budget adjustments then to try to figure out, in the off chance that this referendum does not pass? And that is a huge concern, not only for me, but several people.
Okay, thank you for that. Very briefly to Ms. Korn. Ms. Korn, are you one of the board members who supported placing this tax question on the August 23rd ballot?
So I missed the very beginning of what you said, but I did hear the question if I supported the referendum being on the ballot. The answer to that question is yes.
Yeah, for the August ballot specifically.
Correct.
Yes, and I think you're. Yeah, folks, and you're aware that Michael Udine, the mayor of Broward County, has referred to this decision as, quote, a trick perpetrated on the voters of Broward County, that this thing should be on the November ballot and fully accessible to all voters. And my question is, why?
Steve, you broke up a little bit at the end there.
Yeah.
I think the question is.
But I think with the question, yeah, it was basically that Mayor Udine had said that it sounded like it was a trick, the way that the people, by doing it in November, when basically there's a lot, by not doing it in November, there's a lot more people voting. So why, and it feels like you're trying to do it when you've got a very limited pool of mostly Democratic voters. So what's your response to that, Ms. Korn?
I could appreciate Udine has. I do not. The last time the referendum was voted on, it was primary, and all voters do have an opportunity to come out and vote for the referendum for again. So our job is for the voters to make the decision whether or not they want the referendum, and so we are just that. I'm actually proud of the fact because I think it gives our community up to
You're breaking up a bit again.
Okay, is this any better?
Yes.
No, we can hear now. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So so I don't know if you heard most of what I said, but he certainly has the ability, and I appreciate that he has that perception. The last referendum was put on for the primary. Everyone does have an opportunity to come out and voice whether or not they want the referendum. At the end of the day, this is a referendum that supports our schools, our students, and our staff.
But did you put it on the ballot in August because you thought it would have a better chance to pass?
When we did the last, I mean, that was always we had to pick it up. I mean, that's just on the first ballot. And I want it to pass. I want it to pass because I want to keep the 600 mental health professionals in our schools. I want to keep the additional 500 security staff in our schools, and I want to make sure that
I'm sorry, you're breaking up again, but I understand your sentiment that this needs to pass in order to help not only teacher raises but also mental health professionals and school safety.
Mr. Zeman wanted to speak briefly to the same point. Go ahead, Al.
You know, I do. I just have to say a couple things that are very important. And again, this is just part of being the experience. One, passing an audit of spending the referendum money that we've already gathered in the way that we promised people we spend it is like pole vaulting over a gnat's eyelash. Of course, the money was spent as it was legally appropriated. It's almost impossible to do it any other way. You'd have to violate so many codes, it would be almost impossible to do it. But I'm going to make a commitment to the Sentinel Editorial Board right now. When I win this election, I will always answer your questions, and I will answer them forthright and clearly every time. You know, the idea that the referendum was put on the August ballot is clearly because you could limit the voters and they primarily be Democrats, and the board wanted the money. And we ought to admit that, and that's what we did. And that's really the better answer. You know, we can't keep pointing at staff said this, which we can never prove, and you know, these explanations about things that so clearly in the public view are things that are done for this reason. But we don't get plain speaking people on the board to come and talk to us about what they're doing. And it makes that corruption of thought and the perception of corruption just rife out there. And I get it, and Ray gets it at events that we go to, and Mr. Moe will get it when he jumps in with us. People are fed up with not getting straight answers to questions because they also care about education. And they want to make sure that the monies that they're giving up in this referendum and otherwise are being spent on the things that they could stand up for. And I'm going to come back to this Dade County thing. Why can Dade County pay $12,000 more per teacher with the same funding formula than Broward can? We've got to figure out how to come up with better solutions, and we can do it.
Okay. Oh, and I actually had another question for Ms. Korn, if you're on there. You were appointed by Governor Scott. You were a Republican then. You became an independent shortly before the 2018 election. And now I understand you've become a Democrat. So can you explain sort of, do you kind of change parties whenever there's a new election?
I do not change parties whenever there's a new election. I've been on the board since 2011. So I decided as I sat with my family and I looked at, can you all hear me this time?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Perfect. So I wanted to look, I did change from Republican to Independent for the last election. And I then decided that in sitting down with my family and having some more time to talk about it and talk about this line with what I do off the board, I decided that changing party to the Democratic Party was a place where my heart and my values are.
Ms. Korn, I've got a quick follow-up question to that, if I can. This is Steve Bosquet. Since you switched from Republican to Independent, take us back to November of 2018. Who did you vote for governor? The choices were Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis.
Yes, they were. I didn't vote for either of them.
And why not?
I support either of them.
I didn't hear that response. I'm sorry.
I did not support either of them.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, I think we've been at this for close to an hour. I really appreciate the responses. I really thank you very much for joining us, Donna Korn, and the other three candidates as well. Thank you. Best of luck to you all.
Thank you.
We'll be back in touch as needed. So thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, have a great day.